Hello, everybody, and welcome to the episode of the podcast number 35. This is the second episode of 2021, and I'm glad to introduce you to a colleague of mine. He's an awesome guy. He came from Iran just 7 months ago here in Germany, or maybe 8. You'll understand better from the conversation, and we're now working together. So for me, it was very interesting to understand what is the background of somebody that was educated as architect in Iran and then moved to Europe, and what are the impressions after this cultural shock. Yeah, so enjoy my conversation with Emad Kashfi, my dear friend and colleague. And I want to remind you that if you want to stay up to date with everything around the podcast, you can just subscribe our email list and get our monthly newsletter. You can do that on thecreativeinsider.com. And you can also follow our social media channels, which are at TCI Podcast on Instagram and the Creative Insider pages on Facebook and LinkedIn. So yeah, thank you very much and enjoy the podcast.
The whole world stops just like that.
Hello, Emad. How are you doing?
Hello.
Welcome to the podcast. You're the second guest, which is recording live in my new podcast studio. So welcome.
That's an interesting thing to hear. Yeah. Thanks for inviting me, man.
Yeah, you're welcome. You were on my list for a long time, and we finally happened to make it, which is cool. And you're also my first Persian guest, my first guest from Iran.
That puts a lot of pressure on me, I guess.
Yeah, now you have to be under pressure. But like for the people who don't know you, you can introduce a little bit yourself. So what's your profession? How old are you?
I start from introducing myself, from saying my name and from scratch. I guess.
Yeah, introduce yourself, whatever
I'm
you...
Emad Kashfi. I come from Iran, and now I'm living in Germany for the past 10 months. I'm an architect, and yeah, that's about it.
Yeah, you're the first. We work together, actually. We work together since... How long have you been working now at the office? 7 months. Oh, so I didn't know you passed also your trial. So congratulations.
Thanks. That wasn't anything special. No one talked about me after 6 months. I haven't talked to anyone about it, so I guess it wasn't. Just it finished already.
Yeah, it flew very quickly.
Yeah.
So yeah, we work together now 7 months. Although we're not in the same department. So we both work in ATP in Frankfurt, which is a very international firm. So, and you're my first colleague of this firm that I'm interviewing on the podcast. So that's also something new.
So you're adding the pressure on me.
I'm adding more pressure on you. But it's really interesting to be able to talk to you in this occasion. Because at work we have had many like small talk chats during the lunch break, or during having coffee. Lots of jokes, a lot of coffee breaks, little jokes. Or when I come by at your office, it's also cool. But never, had some small stories of your background, but never the complete picture, the whole picture, the big picture of your background. So, and it's I think for me and for the audience, it's very interesting to hear, somebody who has studied in Iran and has a background from Iran, because also I think it's very interesting to talk to people from different nationalities on this podcast, so that you can sort of understand more, and sort of creating this international dialogue, so that we kind of see that there is not so much difference, or that the difference are not that big as we think.
Yeah, cool. I hope it would be interesting for your listeners. I'm sure that they're really a creative type, and I hope it would be help them to be more creative and enjoy this podcast.
For sure. But every podcast starts with the question. I'm curious, was there a specific moment in your life where you decided, okay, now I'm going to be an architect. I want to be an architect. When in your life you started thinking about becoming this profession?
I think it was just before in Iran, we need to get an examination before getting into university. So we need to take an exam. And at that point, you need to decide in which major would you study. Actually, I didn't have any idea about architecture. My brother was my brother is a structural engineer, and he used to construct some building back then, but not anymore. He now works on different majors. But yeah, that was the whole thing about architecture that I knew at that time. I wasn't sure about it, but at that time I thought that it's a cool thing to study. And so I took the exam and I applied for all the universities in Tehran. And after the examination, I was accepted to study in the university in Tehran. So that was it. I hadn't any idea what I'm applying for. So
how old were you back then?
I was 18.
18.
Yeah. And after starting the study in the university, I thought that it's a cool subject. I could be a good architect. Maybe I try, but I think in the first semester I still didn't have any good idea what am I doing here. But little by little, it was getting better back then. Yeah.
I want to just ask you to talk a little bit closer to the microphone and not move too much around, because there are some up and downs. I'm curious, what were the requirements to get into the university? And you said all the universities in Teheran. How many are they?
In Tehran, there's, I think, back then it was around 10 to 12 universities. Yeah, some private universities and some governmental. Actually, all of them are governmental, but the name is different. It's not private school back then. Now we have some private schools, but back then there weren't any. And when I'm talking about back then, it was 2005. So, yeah.
That's a while ago. But how did you... Because, for example, when I was in Rome, we needed to do an exam where actually in Italy you can only apply in one university, because the questions that you need to answer to get into the university are all the same on a national level. So after you have completed your test, you can request to apply also for other university. And if you did the score that it's needed to get in that university, you can also get there. But you can apply in any university from basically everywhere. And how is it? What did you needed to do to get a spot in the university?
Just your score in that exam, in that I don't know how should I call it in English. We call it concours in Iran. It means that it's an examination that it's about your knowledge, your high school knowledge in mathematics, in physics, and biology and this kind of thing. And after that exam, you got a score. If your score is good, you're gonna get into better university. If it's not that good, you're gonna go to another cities in less popular universities and things like that. But it has got nothing to do with architecture or with, I don't know, other majors. But you definitely need to say that I want to study in architecture, and they say that they will look that if you get the minimum requirement of score to get to the university.
So you apply for the university, and then you say, I want to study in this university, and then in the faculty of architecture. But you could apply also for something else.
Yeah, there's a list. You can write down 100 majors with university. For example, your first choice is gonna be University of Tehran, architecture. The second could be studying physics in University of Shiraz. I don't know, whatever. But if it's not a good system of getting admissions, because it has got nothing to do with what you like. Maybe you're not good at architecture, who knows? But maybe because you write it down on top of your list and you've got the good score, you're gonna accept to that university.
But once you're accepted, can you still reject it? Say, oh no, I changed my mind.
You can do that, but you need to, next year you need to to take that exam again.
But in Italy, it's similar. Like most of the exam, it's not about architecture. You have some questions because you have to answer, like, I don't know, they were, I think, 50, 60, something like that questions where you just need to cross the right question. But the thing is that if you answer correctly, you get 3 points. If you don't answer, you get 0 points. If you answer wrong, it's -1 point. So it's made in this way so that you don't just cross anything that you think it's correct and then just by luck get in. But the whole idea about it is that, to give everybody a chance to, try to study whatever they wanted to, even if that's why it's not only architecture related, but most of the questions are sometimes logic. Sometimes you need to read very contoured, texts and answer questions about those. So yeah, it's also not really connected to architecture in Italy.
It's the same, I guess. Just maybe different maybe in details, but
yeah,
the whole idea is the same.
And are there limited spots also?
Yeah, definitely. It depends on the university, as I told you.
Where did you get in and how many spots they had?
I really don't remember, but I was okay, I guess, because...
No, in which university did you get accepted?
Yeah, the university was a new university back then. It was called Bmw in Teheran. And it was the second year that they started the architectural course, Before that, they didn't have any architecture, so it was something new for that university. And it wasn't that easy because they weren't very good at giving courses, because everything for the university also was new. And there were some good professors, some professors which weren't very qualified. But it was a challenge, because it was a new university, and we need to practice, I guess, more, because we wanted to say that we were just as good at architecture at any other university in Iran. So this is why there was more pressure on us.
When you started studying architecture, what kind of subjects you studied the first year? What was how it was the education there? What kind of things you did?
The first year was just general subject, I guess, sketching and learning perspectives and
But by hand doing this.
Yeah, exactly. First year was always by hand, and yeah, just like learning 1 point perspective, 2 point perspective, and reflection, this kind of thing. First year was all about this,
All about drawing.
all about drawing, I guess. Yeah.
And when
No
did,
theory.
no, yeah, okay. And then when did you started designing? And
I think in the second semester we had some designing courses as well, but really easy stuff like how to work with boxes, how to, mostly easy stuff. How to mix a sphere with a box with a pyramid and this sort of thing. And in the third semester, I was more of a challenge. The challenge got a bit complicated to design a house with simple geometric forms and.
and that did you have some sort of history of architecture and things like that?
I think we started learning about this kind of thing in the third year of university. Usually the most important subject was Iran architecture, and we had some courses on modern architecture, and also there was another course called Islamic architecture. So this was our theory of architecture back then.
Yeah, I'm curious. I was very curious to hear about this education, especially in this way, because in Europe we have a lot of history of architecture. In Rome, for example, you start with contemporary and more like contemporary architecture, which is like from the end, let's say from the Eiffel Tower, no, from Piranesi to Zaha Hadid. And then you start with, then you go to ancient architecture till Gothic, and then you do like Baroque and Renaissance. And I was wondering how it works in Iran because, for example, we never studied Islamic architecture or in other courses, we have studied, for example, some Iranian systems of building, particularly these towers, these famous Persian towers for the climate, the wind catchers, which for me were super fascinating, and because it's a so smart thing to do in environments like Iran, but this is what is it about. Like when you don't have dialogue with people who studied somewhere very far away from you, you assume that what you have studied, it's, the only thing or the right thing or the wrong thing, whatever, but it's the thing. And I was wondering what was your background and if you got also to study, international modern architecture, or what were the references where you were designing things in Iran?
The thing is with Iran University, all of them are not good with theory. We have really nice professors in maybe design studio, or some detailing and stuff like that. But in theory, there's a gap because, for example, we had a course about contemporary architecture of the West, and it was just a small course and nothing really special. We were studying just one book, and it was just like reading newspaper. The professor just introduced us to the headlines of the contemporary architecture. For example, there was this deconstructivism movements, or just, another movement or whatever, and that was it. And that was the whole thing about contemporary architecture of Western society. And Yeah, about the Islamic architecture, it was just the same, just reading this book, and at the end of the course, they would take an exam, and that's it. Uh, Definitely, all the universities in Iran has this gap, I think, when it comes to theories. Usually, people after universities or during the university, when they are motivated about this stuff, start to study themselves and not in the university. I think it's not that different from anywhere else in the world, because at the end of the day, with architecture, it means that how much you enjoy reading about architecture and not just passing the courses.
I think, for example, because I've studied in Rome and in Germany, and in Rome was very theoretical. For example, the first year, because we divide the university in years, although still semesters, but the second semesters we needed to design 3 houses in 3 different parts of like landscapes. So one villa was in the city, one villa was on a lake, and one villa was in the mountains. And but beside this, we needed to read 3 books. There was a list of 20 books, and you have to read 3 of them. You pick 3 which you like, and then you need to write like for each one some paper work what you understood from the book. And that was interesting. And when I arrived to Germany, in Germany it was more practical. It just start doing something, and they were more focused on how it's gonna be built, more details, like constructive details and things like that. But of course, all the students then focus on learning whatever they were enjoying more. But I was also thinking, how long was the bachelor? How long is the bachelor in Iran? 3 years or long?
It is 4 years.
4 years.
Yeah.
And you needed to also interrupt it because you have the military service, or afterwards?
The military service comes after.
And so what?
Before, you can go to the military service at first and then go to the university. Or you can start your university studies and then after that go to the military service. But it's an obligatory thing. You can't escape from it.
No. That's off. I mean, there are many countries, I think, that still have the military service also. I think Korea and there are a lot of countries that they have it. And how long was the military service?
During my time, it was 17 months, but now it's 2 years.
And now it's even longer.
Yeah.
And so you studied for 4 years. So what did you enjoy more from the university, and what did you enjoy less?
My university years was, at one hand, fun, but at the other hand was hard, because I've started my professional work during the university years. So in the second year, I started my work. Actually, I was full-time. I had a full-time job in a company back then. I was a student, but I had a full-time job. So that means that I needed to work really hard. 150 hours at work, and then working on the projects. And that's a bit of a challenge, because the work was that sometimes I work on the weekend as well to come up with this 50, 60 hours. So that was a challenge for me back then.
But you mean 150 work and university?
Work hours. University hours was different from that. This is why I'm saying.
But man, 150 hours a week, that's more than the week.
Not week, month, actually.
150 hours per month.
Yeah.
Which, okay, that's like full-time job.
Yeah.
It's 8 hours a day. So
8 hours a day, and that means that sometimes I had to work on weekends, and sometimes after after maybe 4 p.m. just starting my work day. So that was something.
yeah, but weren't you obligated to follow some classes at the university, like actually be there?
Yeah, for sure. And this is why I'm telling you that was hard, because for example, sometimes I needed to be at the university 3, 4, 5 hours, and after that I was running to the office and do the office thing.
And because Teheran is huge. How many millions lives there? Like a lot.
It's not really clear how many millions living there, but I would guess that more than 12 millions.
And were the university and the office far away from each other, or?
Yeah.
And how did you find this job already the second year of university?
Second year, yeah. I've started working on some university projects since the third semester in the university. So that means that I was doing some job for the other students, doing some, I don't know, some small designing or thing, because you can always find some student who are lazy enough to give money to other people do their jobs. And yeah, that was my case. I needed the money, I guess, and at the other hand, I wanted to be creative and say that I can do that. I can study and work at the same time. So after during the fourth semester, I've got introduced to a company, and I told them that I'm a student, but this is my student work till now. And the manager saw my works and said, "Yeah, you can work here as a part-time job." And yeah, it began.
But you said the first year was only drawing by hand, and at which point you started using the computer? I'm curious because I work now with you, and I think there is no software in the architectural field where you don't know anything about that. So maybe you don't know to use it that well, but there is no software that you cannot use.
Yeah, man, that was my case. I think I was too lazy using my hands, because it needs lots of effort, to be good with hands, the hand drawing, I guess. So I started using computers. It was much more easier for me. And I was good at drawing by hands, but I wasn't that passionate about it. So I started to learning computer software. First thing was AutoCAD. I was at the end of second semester. Definitely was at the end of second semester. I started to learn how to draw a plan or a section using AutoCAD. And during the third semester, I used to cheat, We needed to come up with the hand sketches or something. I used to model it in the 3D model and then print it and put it behind a glass or something and draw on it. Yeah, it was a fun thing, because the other drawing was really, primitive, and I could have come up with this nice drawing and something, and no one knew that I was cheating,
And did you get good grades in the end of the day?
For sure.
I remember we had drawing, but drawing a building in we were that was so weird, because we had to go around the city, and every semester the teachers would pick one building, because there's so many historical buildings in Rome, and you need to go there and draw it live. And yeah, the thing is that theoretically you would do your work for the exam during the semester and you need to learn the theory. And a lot of people, because they weren't that good, they would cheat by making a picture of the building and then putting the picture under something glass table or something and drawing it. But the thing is that they didn't want us to draw the building in perspective. So it's like you look at the building and you draw elevation and part of the ground floor or whatever. And because photography is always in perspective, they always got caught. And that was the part where I thought, okay, it's too much work to cheat, to take a picture and make it straight. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do it. And I learned to draw. So I was good, but because I also studied at School of Art, so it was okay. And so you started with AutoCAD, and then I guess that was helpful for you also for your job, right? Because
Yeah, definitely. Because I thought that if I'm gonna stand out, I need to be good at something. Drawing by hand is definitely a cool thing. I wasn't hopeless. I was okay. And till this day, I'm not that hopeless. I can draw. But I was too lazy, as I told you, because if you want to draw something and if it's going to be standouts, you need to be super good at drawing. You can't be, say that I know the basics, but I'm not that good. It doesn't work. You need to be super good at drawing, and that means lots of practice, hundreds of hours of practice each month, I guess, at the beginning at least. After that, it just become part of you. You can draw easily. But at that time, that wasn't a thing for me. I thought that I need to come up with a solution faster. So I find a solution in learning softwares. And that was a really nice way to get involved in real projects, in a professional work. And that was a good thing for me back then because there were always someone who could have used my work with drawing a plan or a document, an architectural document, an elevation, a section or something. And yeah.
And when you started this job, first professional job, what kind of projects you were working on, and what were your tasks in the beginning?
In that company, I started working on some interior design projects. There was a small company, and it was a young company, I guess. And there weren't any, special projects or very, it wasn't anything special when I look back at it. Just some ordinary interior design project, just, a kitchen there, a removing wall on that corner of the building and choosing material. But for me, that was super exciting. Because I could have, brag about it that I'm working on a professional work, and yeah, that's it.
But when you started working full time, did they pay you like good enough for you? I mean, because for me it was a big motivation when I came here to find a job as a student. Because here there is like, in Germany, I mean, there is like, there are laws which support companies when they get students because they pay less taxes. And also they, they, in the end of the day, the money that you get are well and good enough to live like a student. In Italy, you wouldn't find any job, or if you find one, they will tell you don't have experience, so you need to work for free in the beginning. So I'm curious, approach in Iran because you were very, young and with not so much experience?
Yeah, in this first company, the money wasn't good at all. It was super low, and you couldn't do anything with that money. But it was the first thing, and in everything, the first thing is it has some specialty about it. I worked with that company around 2 months, and after that, I've stopped going there because the university thing was getting harder. Lots of projects with different courses. So I focused on student projects and some outsourced projects, just drawing some document for small, contractors and these sort of things. But after fourth semester, I hired by a young architecture firm called RL Architects Group, and at that company they gave me minimum wage. It wasn't something special, but it was okay. I could live with it. I'm not. It's a bit hard for me to convert the money that I was getting in Iran to, I don't know, US dollar or euro, because it's always changing. I need to think about it. How much was it back then? And if you want to know, I can tell you a figure, but I need to think about it and convert it to euro or dollar. I don't know.
No, I don't want to know that because that's not really for example, I had people on the podcast, a lot from the archivist industry, they do renderings. And I had this girl which first worked in the Netherlands, then she went to Hungary, and then she moved to England now. And she was telling me, that was, I think, the podcast number 11. She was telling me about that, for example, in Hungary, she worked for Brick Visuals, which is one of the best visualization companies. And she said that the money she was taking in Hungary were great for Hungary because you could live in downtown, eat outside a lot of, go to restaurants and stuff like that. But of course, as soon as you left Hungary, it wasn't that great anymore because, for example, in Germany, it's more expensive, or in Italy, it's more expensive. So it's more interesting what kind of quality of life you could get, and if you say, for me as a student back then was good.
Yeah, first 2 or 3 jobs before joining RL Architects Group wasn't something that I could live with, just covering my university expenses. The first job was $1 per hour.
Okay.
Yeah, that actually was nothing. But when I joined RL, it was better because it was at least a bit better than the previous jobs. But the responsibility was greater. At that time, the company was founded 3-4 years before I joined the office, so they were young, and there weren't any special luxury projects. They were also working on some small type projects, some interior design projects. But at some point, we get this assignment of designing an interior renovation for Iran National Museum. So that was a big deal for me back then, and I was responsible for designing some interior design for this project. It wasn't anything fancy because it was a renovation, and we weren't allowed to do anything, crazy. just normal stuff. changing the floor material, changing some walls and things like that, designing a false ceiling for it. But the name was big, designing Iran National Museum. It was a big thing back then for me without any experience. First thing to do was that, and back then I was really proud of.
And I always say that in the beginning of the career of a creative, you maybe trade the money for skills. Like you maybe work for a little while for not money or no money or very few money, but then you get back, some craft, some skills at something. And did you feel that for this first experience at the very first office and then this one made you learn some workflow that as a student you didn't know, that maybe helped you also, to be better at university, like to be faster, because for example, before I had any experience in a professional world, I would do all the projects with the classic brute force solution, where you do your projects until you don't finish, without sleeping, without leaving the room. And then when I went to the work, then I learned, if you create your file or your system to work and stuff like that, you will be quicker. And then I finished my last semester, which was the hardest one, without any overnight work. So I was wondering if, although those companies were small and new, they had some, workflow that helped you a lot.
Yeah, for sure. Because at first it taught me how to work fast. Because I was a student, I had a full-time job. And that means that I needed to done the task as fast as possible so I could find a time to do my university projects. And I think I learned how to work fast in that time. There were always pressure, just this project here, project in the university, and as you mentioned, and just be on the way through university to the office, and always in a rush, always this hectic feeling, and always that you're behind the deadline, or it really taught me to work fast. I don't know if it was good at that time, because when you work fast, you can't focus on the details, and but at the same time, you know that you can finish the job. You need to finish the job, and that was a really good lesson for me, and I think it helped to build a strong resume for me to be better with the future projects.
And I'm curious also, what was the relationship with your colleagues at work and with your professors at the university? Because, for example, the professors in Rome, a part of a few, they are very, make you feel inferior because they're I don't know. I had some professor which have, of course, important roles, and some others. Yeah, all of them have very important roles. And then when they came to Germany, they were important, but they were more friendly, and when every semester there would be a semester finishing party, and you would meet them in the cafe of the university, and you'll drink something together, and they will be very, talking to you normally like your friend or people that they know. And so I'm curious in how was the working environment and the university environment, both?
Yeah, working environment and university environment at that time for me was totally different. You know, there was two different worlds because at the office I had so many young colleagues who were just like me, were students because the office was young, and they hired usually creative minds that were young, and I don't know, they were just like me, students, a good students in different university. And it was a really friendly atmosphere, and we used to had lots of fun working on different projects. Actually, at that time, the project weren't great in details or in scale, but we had lots of fun, and we could come up with lots of different ideas and solutions for projects. But in the university, it was a different thing because, as I told you before, the university itself didn't had any long history. It was a new university, especially with architecture, and the professors who were teaching there weren't that great themselves. You know, you couldn't find any big names, and there were big names in politics usually. And you know, the management of the university were thinking that maybe if we bring a mayor, or I don't know, consultants of the mayor, they have a big name and they could work also great with teaching. But it wasn't the case, you know, they weren't that great at teaching. And they hadn't they hadn't many experience with real job of architecture. They were very famous in, you know, writing rules and regulation about architecture in Iran, but not as an architect who's great with designing and with creativity and things like that. And I'm really happy that I had the opportunity to work with private companies at that time, because the university couldn't give me the thing that I needed at that time. So I focused mostly on my private job, and I was always great with design studio at university because I liked it very much, and I put so much effort and time on that specific course. But the other courses was just I wasn't crazy about them. I just studied enough to pass the course. You know, nothing more, nothing less, because the professors weren't that friendly. They were busy with doing some, I don't know, political job or something like that, and they were just coming to the university. They had 2 hours, or I don't know, 4 hours of teaching, and then go out of the university, and we couldn't see them till next week. And that wasn't a really friendly atmosphere back then in the university. Of course, we are as students had lots of fun, but it wasn't bringing us anything special to provide us with the knowledge that we needed to get into the real life.
I was also wondering, were there any international students at the university or no? Okay. And how long did you work for this other company when you did the National Museum of Iran?
I was there till the end of my university year. So actually, I was there for almost 3 years. Less than 3 years, because I joined the office at my second year in the university, and my my university study took around 4 years. I think I was there for 2 year and a half. And we designed so many interior projects back then. And also so many private villas and houses.
And which softwares did you use there?
I used mostly AutoCAD and 3D Studio Max with V-Ray. For at that time I was starting to learn about V-Ray, and after 6 months, I guess I was getting better at it. So yeah, I used to work with V-Ray lots of time and with 3D Studio Max. Yeah.
But all the softwares you learn on your own. You didn't have like classes at the university or.
I remember now a really funny story about software and university, because I used to work with software, and I think in the third year of the university we had this course, how to use software in architecture. And the teacher wanted to show us something, some basics, and I knew all the things about the software because I was working with the software for 2 years. And I've got into a fight with the teacher because he won't believe that, for example, he gave us a task and I've done it in a day, and he won't believe that I did it myself. So yeah, we got into a fight, and I've never attended that class again.
But how did you pass?
I don't know, man. To this day, I don't know because I've never took the exam, but he gave me a good note. Maybe he just realized after that I really don't know, man.
What software was that?
That was 3D Studio Max.
Ah, okay. Well, there you're the guy probably to go to. And then when you finished university, you said you needed to go for your military service. So you needed, I guess, also to quit your job or at least stop it, freeze it. I don't know.
The thing with the end of university was that I finished all the courses after 4 years except my thesis project. And that wasn't that because I couldn't finish it. I didn't finish it because I didn't want to go to the military service. You know, in Iran, there's this law that allows you to continue your university studies for 6 years, your bachelor. So, I didn't do my projects until the 6 years. So I had extra 2 years to be working on whatever I was working on. So after 4th year, I've left the RL Architects group and I joined another firm. And I was there for, I guess, a year and a half. Then I did my thesis projects and finished my university. And I had to go to a military service.
And what was your thesis project about?
The name is Bmw Symphony of Mobility.
Oh, really? It's about BMW?
Yeah, I've designed an exhibition for BMW in Tehran.
Oh, but they actually then built it, or it was just an idea?
No, it was just an idea.
Okay. But I think it's cool that you could say it's BMW, because here they wouldn't allow us to say it's for BMW.
Yeah. We could have come up with any idea that we wanted, any subjects. Of course, if it was suited, you know, if it was something out of ordinary, no one would allow it. But I focused on the exhibition and cultural thing, and I wrote in my thesis that I want to focus on the social aspect of an exhibition, and I want to focus on an exhibition as a social plaza for the city. And because of that, they allowed me to, design the thing. So I had a long time to work on this project because I wanted to go to the military service as late as possible. So I worked on this project for a year and a half, of course, parallel to my professional job.
What I'm thinking, it's like, because I did the same with my thesis. I was working and I was doing my thesis, and I also took me longer just because, when you work full time and then you're tired in the end of the day sometimes. And I'm wondering, I lost a little bit of motivation to work for something that's not going to be built, because I was thinking this is just nonsense. Like, why I'm doing this? So when you had so much experience with actual project, were you also a little bit demotivated to do your thesis, which was just theory, or you still were enjoying it a lot and you were very motivated to do it as best as possible?
Actually, my case was far different from yours, I guess, because I was really passionate about this project. In my professional work, I was working on so many projects, but as I told you, small projects, interior design projects, and these kind of projects that are not really fun for an architect. At the other hand, the project with this Bmw Symphony of Mobility was that you could do anything you want, big saloons, big amphitheaters, and everything, and no limits. Just design what you want. And because of that, that was lots of fun. And I was experiencing different sort of renderings, visualization, I don't know, whatever, working on complex geometries. And that was just like a workshop for me, a year and a half working on crazy stuff and,
If you have this project somewhere online, I'll link it to the description of the podcast so that people can see themselves what was the result of it.
Yeah, I think I've uploaded several years ago in Archinect website. I think it should be still there.
Okay, if you give me a link, I will put it in the description so people not only can hear about it but see it. And then, when I did my thesis, not that I wasn't passionate about my project, but I was thinking that because I was doing a big work, and then professors were adding ridiculous, requirements to it. And I was thinking those requirements are stupid because I'm doing, this big project and this thing is not going to get built. But whatever. I finished it. It was a good work. And I was motivated because I thought this thing, it's gonna be my resume for the rest of my life. If ever somebody asked me what is my thesis, it couldn't be very bad because, and I had also very cool. I was also very passionate about the design subjects and not that much about the rest. Just it depends on the interest that it created in me. But in the end, you knew that you needed to go to the military service for 1.5 years, more or less. And I'm thinking, okay, when you go from 1.5 years on the military service doing completely other things for so long time, was that like, when you went back to creativity, were your skills a little bit worsened?
I think I'm an exception with this kind of thing. I don't know why, because I was working all the time, and I couldn't stop working, even when I was supposed to do the military service. I think I put lots of pressure on myself back then as well, because I was in the military service till 2 p.m. And after that, I was hurrying up to the office to continue the work. I've never stopped working. Yeah.
But I thought that this military service is full time, where you go some in a camp or something. I don't know.
For the first 2 months, it is full time. In that 2 months, I couldn't do anything. I took some books with me, just reading something, and that's it. But yeah, you for 2 months you're in a different world, separated from the reality, I guess. Yeah, but after that, it's you need to go to I don't know, a building, a military building every day in the city. You need to be there for 7 hours or so. It starts at 6 a.m., 6:30 a.m., and it will end around 2 p.m. So it's also 8 hours or so. But after that, you're on your own. You can do anything you want.
And you were living also like in your own apartment, like.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, it depends on which city.
But you stay in your city.
It's not up to you.
Okay, but how about you?
I was lucky. I was doing my military service in Tehran, so that was okay.
But that was your luck, because if they have sent you to another city, you should have stayed then in their apartments or whatever.
First 2 months, I was in another city. I was in a very traditional city of Iran, in the middle of Iran, in Yazd, for 2 months. But after that, I was back to Tehran.
And but were you then working as a freelance in that part of your career? So you were in that 24, 25?
I was 24, 25, I guess, yeah.
And you were working freelance?
Yeah, can I go back a bit?
Sure, you can.
I would give you the rest of the story from when I left RL Architects Group and joined the other company, and then what happens in the military service. Because at my last month as an RL Architects Group, I've designed projects for a very well-known bank. It wasn't a project, it was actually a competition, but a limited competition. The subject was coming up with a guideline for renovating the facades of this bank. So I've designed something, and it won the first prize. But after that, something important, I guess, happened to me, because I thought that it is a good time to change what I'm doing at the moment, because it was a really big deal for the company. One of the biggest clients in Iran was this bank, and they had several projects. But the thing that happened to me was that I've designed something in the competition, but the minute the company started working on the details and on how to continue the project, I saw that everything is different now. There's nothing remained from the first design that was on the competition. So that was a really sad thing to experience. I thought, before that, I thought that if I ever win a competition, that would be different. I would do that differently. But when the reality happened, I saw that it's not the same. Everything is about the money, because the company needed the money, and it was a really big deal. So they would say okay to everything the client wanted. And at the end of the day, they changed the design completely. And I thought that it's a good time to start something new. So I've changed my company. I've joined another young company, and I was there for a year and a half during my thesis project. And after that, I thought that it's the good time for me to start my own project, because I was working in these small offices for almost 4 years. And I thought it's a good time to start my own studio. So I started before going to the military services. And the military services happened. I needed to be on the camp for 2 months, and after that, going to the, to the job, I guess, or whatever, for 7-8 hours. Yeah, so I started working as a freelance, and yeah, that was another challenge.
And that sounds cool. And where did you get your first client? What kind of projects you started to work on?
Here comes the hard part because I started, I don't know, a studio, a business or something, but I realized that I don't have any client. So what can I do now? I had some small contacts with small businesses, with some, a small project, some interior design projects as well. I was starting working on those kind of projects, but after 2-3 months, I realized that I'm working my ass off, but I can't gain anything from these sort of jobs. The architectural projects are really bad, and the money is also bad, and I'm wasting my life actually, and I'm spending so much time and money on the thing that brings nothing. So I thought that I definitely need to do something about it, and at that time, I started thinking, what can I do? What am I good at the moment? I'm good at designing, but no one cares about it because I'm a young person with not lots of experience. No one gonna give me a good, assignment. So I focused on the rendering thing because I've heard lots of time from different colleagues, different people that I'm good at renderings. I never knew that. I always thought that if I'm designing something, I need to present it in a good way. So at that moment, I realized maybe I could do something with this ability, do something with this visualization, with this 3D rendering or so. So I started preparing a resume, a portfolio, and I sent it to all the good companies in Iran. And after 2 weeks, I started receiving lots of feedback. And I was definitely surprised because I never thought that I'm gonna receive any feedback. Because in that portfolio, there weren't any big names. There was just my name and 2 small studios. No one knew about them. But and I should also mention that in those years, I was participating in lots of competitions, local and international, with no result actually. But I spent so much time on competitions, and in that portfolio, I think it was 8 to 10 renders, a summary of the things that I was doing during the past 4 years. So I received lots of nice feedback from best architectural companies in Iran, the big names, the famous architects, and everybody wanted to, know my price and wanted to give me a task, and that was really something for me back then, because I realized that I can work as a freelancer, maybe not in architecture, but maybe as a 3D artist. So I focused on that thing, and actually I built a reputation for me as a 3D artist back then.
And for how long did you do this job as a 3D artist? Did you manage then to move on architecture at some point? Or how did that end up being? For how long did you do that?
military service, it was 1 year and a half, almost 2 years. I was getting sick and tired with this visualization because, it's after you're doing it, you realize that it's not a real architecture. And I was always fascinated with the real thing. You realize that actually it's a sad story because you started learning architecture and spending so much time on it, and after 5 years you're starting doing some projects for some architects who not doing the job well, and they expect from you to make their design beautiful and make it so that they can sell their idea. Actually, at some cases there aren't any idea, but you need to come up with something, and it is really a conflict, For me, actually, it was a conflict because these architectural firms didn't pay me well. They always had these crazy deadlines, I was supposed to come up with 2-3 nice rendering during a night, and I did this job, but they didn't pay me back. They said that no, we're sorry, but we're working on it. I don't know, blah blah. We will pay you later or whatever. And at that point, it was really frustrating for me. So then I started to thinking, what can I do next? I'm good at doing that, but it's nothing that I really want. So I started to send another portfolio and resume to the other companies or the companies that I worked with before. And I told them that I can help you on your architectural project as well, as a second-hand architect. I don't know if the term exists or not, but it means that they had the project, but maybe they were too busy or they didn't have enough capacity to do the project themselves or whatever, and they were looking for someone to do the job for them or help them to develop the idea or whatever. And this is how I started working on bigger projects as a second-hand architect. And in this way, I had the opportunity to work with lots of good architects, developing the projects with them, sometimes doing the projects completely from scratch, sometimes taking the project and completed it, but usually the work was in the design phase, not in detailing, not in construction phase or everything, in the concept and in the designing phase.
But I remember from some of our chats, you were mentioning that at some point you were considering also taking a master in architecture, and you were applying for some university, or you had also like opportunities to go to Canada maybe. At which point did that happen? Because from now in the story wasn't there that you were trying to also maybe do a master.
Yeah, that was before his military service and everything. After I've finished my thesis project, I applied for some university. I had a really, really great friend who lived in Canada, but unfortunately something happened and she passed away. And because of that, I couldn't think about that kind of thing anymore, and I was too depressed, and I tried to work more and focus on the job and not on the academic anymore. There was another point after 2-3 years after that I thought for a moment that maybe I need to continue my education here in Iran, but I've started doing some research about the best universities of Iran, but I've decided not to and focus on professional jobs. Yeah.
And okay, and then when you went back to the actual architectural industry, for how long did you do that job, and before you thought again to moving abroad?
Those 3 years are really important for me because at one point I was super busy with very luxury projects, but at the same time I was sad because and it was my own decision. I couldn't blame anyone for that decision because I had to run my studio and I needed money, and also I loved architecture and I wanted to work on big projects. So this is my decision to work with the other architects. That meant at that time that I couldn't get enough credit for what I was doing back then. I was working on big projects, but there were no name of me anywhere, because the companies were too egoistic to confess that there's another young practice, another young studio who's doing the concept behind the job. I won several competitions for several companies, but as a job behind the scene, and that was something that I don't know if I should be proud of or not, because at the same time I was gathering much experience from these competitions, from the working on bigger projects, working on well-known developing projects, and the best thing that was happening in Iran. But at the same time, I couldn't get enough money and reputation about what I was doing, forgetting the client himself. I made a name for me inside the architecture community in Tehran. Everybody knew my name, but I couldn't get a contract from a private client, because in Iran it's just like that. Private clients don't care about competitions. They want to see what have you built and what could you do, and they don't care about competitions. Yeah.
That's everywhere. They care about what you built. I think I watched the documentary about Björk Ingels, and he says that when they got their first contract, that they haven't built even the doghouse, nothing. But they were lucky enough to convince their contractor. So it's everywhere. But you say you were working as a backup architect. But were you always alone, or you had also your own employees?
During the first 2 years, I was completely alone. Just in 1 or 2 cases, maybe I called some friends to help me with some projects. But after 2 years, after I've started working on an architectural project, I've started to getting help from other people. I won't say employees, because I wasn't thinking about that. I was always thinking that this is a personal project, this is just a freelance project, and the other people could come here. I would talk to them individually about the project, and we could work on this project basis. But at one point, there were 6 or 7 other people working with me on that small studio.
Oh, that sounds like fun. But when you realized this was sort of your limit because of these indirect connections with clients or not having any background in having built projects, is that when you thought, okay, now I want to have an experience abroad, or at which point you actually decided you want to go abroad, and was always Germany the place you wanted to go?
It was 2015 when all this thing that I'm telling you happened. And at the same time, I've got a really nice offer from my old office, RL Architects Group. The manager, who was a friend at that time, asked me to go back to the office and work there as their head of design. And that company actually grew bigger during the past 5 years. And because of the project that they had with that bank, they were very successful financially. And at that point, I was getting tired about working indirect with clients, and that was a really nice opportunity for me to work on bigger projects, and I had the resources to work on a more professional studio, because I could have lead a team, and the most important thing for me, that was, I don't need to be involved with the bureaucracy of things, getting money from the clients, or I don't know, the thing that you need to deal with when you have an office. The insurance thing and this kind of thing is really crazy. I really hated this kind of things, but when you have your own studio, you definitely need to deal with them. So it was a really nice thing that was happening to me. I took the offer, and I worked there as a head of design for 4 years till last year, I guess.
Now 2 years in 2019.
Yeah, 2019. Yeah, exactly. Something happened in 2018 that also was important turning point for me. I was responsible for designing a wooden construction in a really big project in Iran, the project called Iran Mall. And it's one of the biggest shopping center in the whole Middle East. The project was 2 million square meters big. And we get this contract to design a very special geometry for some part of this huge complex. So I've designed this wooden construction, and no one in Iran could, develop this idea, because although engineers in Iran are really great with concrete and steel structures, they have absolutely no idea when it comes to wood. So I've started to search for international companies. One Swiss company get in contact with me, and they were very enthusiastic about working on this project as a partner, and they're one of the best in the world, I guess. They're called Bloomers and Lemon, and at that time they were working on projects for Foster, for Heatherwick, for Shigeru Ban, and these kind of architects. And they were happy to help us with this project. So that was a really big deal for me. We started working on that project for. I was busy with this project for 3 or 4 months, but the other company started to help us for another 3 months. But in 2018, something happened with the financial situation of Iran, and because of that, the whole project just canceled, and all of our effort and time just went down the drain. And that was really something that shouldn't have happened. You work several months on a project, and then because of something that has nothing to do with you or with your design or anything, your effort is just wasted. And but during this project, I started to see differently how an international company work on a design process, an engineering process, on the communication process. I was working, I think, for more than 10 years at that point. But that was something new for me. And I thought that maybe I need something new. I need to get out of the box here in Iran and start working with international company for gaining more experience. And I realized that the situation of Iran is getting a bit messy, the financial situation. So adding these two together, I started thinking really about going abroad and continue my work working with an international company.
That's, I think that happened with a lot of projects in 2008 in Germany also, when the world economic crisis hit the whole world. And a lot of people moved like you instead somewhere like to Dubai. For example, I have had former colleagues, bosses who went to Dubai in that time of the history. Like a lot of people do that because of economical reasons. And I'm curious, how did you decide exactly Germany and how the whole process worked to, apply and get an interview and so on, and the visa and everything?
I think Germany was always on my mind since I was a child. I think it has something to do with football and World Cup, and I don't know this sort of thing, because I loved Germany since I was a child. I think definitely it has something to do with football.
Yeah, I love especially the World Cup '94.
I don't.
When Bulgaria won against Germany.
I don't want to mention that. Yeah, that was a sad story.
Not for me.
Yeah, not for you, definitely not for you. Yeah. I really like learning new languages. Germany was also something. Sorry, I lost a train of thought.
You wanted to learn new languages, and Germany was.
In my life, I really liked learning new languages, and I've started learning German, I think 5 years ago, just for fun. It's someone if listen this podcast would say I'm a crazy guy because no one would learn German just for fun, But in my case, that was just so. I started learning German just for fun and just for keep my mind busy. I've learned German for 2 years. Then I stopped because I was super busy with work and with other stuff. But after I decided to do something about future and do something about working abroad, I realized that Germany could be a really nice destination. And German architecture, especially contemporary German architecture, although not very glamorous, but really is solid and really need a second look for architects. And at the on the other hand, you could see that they're really good at engineering, detailing, and this kind of thing. And I thought that I knew a bit German. I loved Germany as a country. Why not? Why not try to work there?
And so you first started the whole process for the visa, I guess, and then you started applying, or how did that work?
That was also, getting a visa as an Iranian is really hard thing to do, especially, for example, for a country like Germany, because especially with the university, studying in Germany are cheap usually, and there were lots of people who wanted to come to Germany, and if you want to get a visa, get an appointment in the embassy, it's gonna take almost 2 years just for an interview in the embassy. And I think I traveled somewhere, and when I came back to Iran, I sent an email to the embassy requesting an interview time. And I totally forgot about it because it was 7 or 8 months after I sent an email, and I didn't get any feedback, and I really forgot about it because you send an email, you waiting for a response, but German embassy won't respond to that. They would wait until your time comes and then send you an invitation for an interview in the embassy, and that was after 15 months after I sent that email. So on that time I went to the embassy, I applied, and it wasn't a hard process after that, but it took almost 2 years, to get the visa.
And did you start applying from Iran to get a job in Germany? How did you find a job in Germany?
That's a nice question, because I went to the embassy, I've applied, and I gave my documents, but the officer in the embassy told me that I need to get in touch with German companies before they give me a visa. And also at that time I needed to get this certificate for my university degree. It's called TCI certificate. And so they gave me this 3 months time to get the certificate, and also they needed my communications with German companies. So I thought that, okay, I'm gonna try my luck, I had 5 companies in mind, the best international companies that I could come up with, and I thought that I have this good portfolio, good resume. I won several competitions and things like that. So definitely if they won't hire me at once, they definitely want to have a job interview with me. So I've sent these 5 or 6 job letters and applications to these famous companies, and I was waiting for their answer. No one answered. And it was a shock for me, because I was living in this bubble that I thought that maybe they saw the portfolio, and the first thing is they would say that we definitely should hire this guy, but they didn't even care. And I wrote my application letter, everything, my resume in English and not in German. And I was applying in a German company, so I think that yeah, they didn't really care because they're getting job application from all over the world, and why should they hire someone from Iran? So I've changed my cover letters, my emails, everything, my resume, my not my portfolio, my resume, everything. I've translated into German, and I've selected another 15 to 20 big companies. One of them was the company that now we're working on, ATP, Architekten und Ingenieure. I was waiting for a response. I thought that this time definitely I would get some feedback. Out of these 20 offices, I think 2 or 3 of them just gave me a feedback. They said that you don't have enough experience, so we will politely reject you. The other, I don't know, 17 or so, they never answered me. And that was really a shock because I thought that I've never expected that. I thought that I have a portfolio. I have more than 12 years of experience, and definitely and I'm not applying for a manager position. I'm applying for a design architect. So just because I knew that if I want to continue my work, I definitely shouldn't think, about these sort of things that I'm gonna go there I'm coming from Iran, I'm gonna go there in Germany, and I definitely wouldn't accept a, managing position. But that was a shock, to be honest. So I thought about different alternatives. I went through my connections because at that time I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to go through the connections and ask a friend who would ask another friend for a job interview or something, but I was somehow desperate. I wanted to work in good companies. I didn't want to come to Germany and work in a company.
Average company.
Yeah, an average company or just a company. Because I had everything. Still, I have everything in Iran, and I wasn't desperate to go outside. I wanted to get a better experience. And this is why I started asking friends who could help me, and actually they helped, and I've got 4 appointments for job interviews in nice companies. One of them was the companies that I sent the job application who never answered. So I get the visa. I came here to Germany. It was in March 2020. And after arriving here in Germany, Corona happened. So the 4 companies, one after the other, they wrote me an email or called me and they say, we're sorry, but we need to cancel the appointment. And that was hell of experience, hell of a bad experience because, and at that time the borders were closed. So I was stuck here actually. For 2 months, there were nothing to do here in Germany, I guess, because I've got bored, so I've accepted 2 interior design projects from back home, so I've designed them with my laptop here and sent them back. So that was okay, not very boring, but that wasn't my plan to come here, stay here in a small room and doing some project back home. Yeah, so the 2 months was really, I should say, that's not fun at all. After 2 months, I think the situation was getting better a bit. And companies were starting their hiring process again. So I've got another 2 job interviews from small companies. some of them were really unknown to me. I just sent wherever I could at that.
At that point, you were
Yeah,
forced to.
I just thought that I thought that my ego is at stake. I had this thing that I thought that maybe I was good or something, but I came here and nothing happened, and I started sending job applications everywhere I could. So I got 2 or 3 job interviews. At that point, I've got a phone call from ATP, and that was a surprise because I've sent an application 5 months before, and no one ever, called me back or wrote me an email or whatever. After 5 months, I've got a call from ATP, and they told me that they're interested, and we should do an interview through Skype. And I had an interview with the head of the design of Frankfurt office. So everything went really good, and I started the work next week after that interview. So and since then I've been working non-stop, no holidays.
Well, no, there were holidays. We were all at home. And then, we got to meet each other. So that was also when I got to know you. And let's say I have now, you have been now 7 months, and I want just, this is not a podcast anyway related to our company or to our office. Just curious to see what is your point of view, because you have this big experience from Iran. For these 7 months, what have you learned here in Germany? Is then, in the end of the day, very much how you imagined it to be in such a big international renowned company as where we work? Or is it different than you expected it? I'm just asking, on the work-wise workflow.
Yeah. Actually, I'm happy that I'm working in a design department directly to the manager of that department. It means that I have the access to the first thing that comes to the office. That was the thing that was really important for me. I didn't want to work, with a project manager and then through this hierarchy, and just it's a good thing that happened to me, that I have this opportunity to work directly with the head of the design of this office, and it means that I could work on the projects, on the creative process of the project, and that was important, first of all. Definitely, I'm surprised about some things that happening. I've never thought, for example, that I would see similar approaches to a project, to the thing with Iran. I thought that everything would be 100% different. At the end of the day, it's not. It's just the same project, maybe same process, maybe different in details, but the main idea, the main concept is just the same. You get the project, you study it a bit, and you're starting doing some sketches, doing some 3D models, and it's just the same. And that was a bit surprising. And I thought that maybe here in Germany, they would go through the details at first step of the projects more, but it's not. It's definitely the same. You just omit everything about the how could I say it, about the restrictions, and start just just like it's anywhere else in the world. And after that, you start adding restrictions, limitations, rules, regulations, and it's just the same.
And do you think that these restrictions and limitations here in Germany are way more complicated, elaborated, more requiring than Iran? Or do you think, from your experience, the level of like restrictions from the point of view of legislations towards architecture also in Iran as strict as here?
I think here in Germany is more flexible than Iran, especially with the fire protection thing. In Iran, maybe they're overreacting things after some incident that happened 2-3 years ago. They're just overreacting. You need to provide everything with your design. But here is more flexible. For example, you can have this concept with the fire protection or the other concept. You don't need to have them both. And you can even, convince a city that you come up with an idea and they will, go through it. And if it's working, definitely you can work on it more. And you can't have that in Iran. It's just black and white. Either you can have it or you don't. And this is something that was really interesting for me, because it means that there's also some committees behind the projects who are really thinking about the project. And I think here comes the difference between working in Iran and working here in Germany, because the creative process is the same, almost the same, but when it comes to detail, when it comes to negotiating, when it comes to developing a project, the difference shows itself.
I forgot to ask you before, because you were talking only about your experience in Iran and your studies. What is the requirement in Iran to have the title of architect? Like, do you need just to have a degree, a bachelor or something? Were you actually architect in Iran, or you were just working in the industry?
I couldn't sign under the documents because I wasn't a registered architect in the in the Chamber of Architecture. But that is not a problem when you're working in Iran, because you can use another colleague's signature or whatever. In an office, there's always a guy who is a member of Chamber of Architecture, and they can sign that.
But what is the requirement to get into the chamber if you wanted to?
It's nothing special. You just need to take a test, and that's it.
And you can do it with bachelor or master, doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. Actually, if you have a bachelor, you need to wait for 3 years. After 3 years, you can participate in the examination, and if you pass the test, you can be part of that chamber. With the master is after 1 year. Actually, master took 2 years, so it's just the same.
Yeah, well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, man, then I think we covered most of it. It was a very interesting story. Now I have like all the pieces of your background connected, which is nice, because at work we never have, that much time to talk about these things. And I think it's really cool, your background, and it's interesting to, discover these stories in first person from someone directly from Iran, and you happen to move here in these crazy times, with the middle of the pandemic, new country, no job. So I think it must have been challenging for you. But I'm very happy that you managed to find a job at the same company I'm working in, to get to know you, because it's really nice working with you and also having this chat with you. So you can say where people can find about you online, so that we can also add these links to the description of the podcast in case anyone wants to follow you somewhere on social media or just get in touch, what are your social media channels?
Oh, I'm on Instagram mostly. I have my website, and website is called emadkashfi.com, and my Instagram is emadkashfi.org. There's also another Instagram page which is public, but usually you can find me playing music, and there's some pictures and things like that, but it has nothing to do with architecture in that aspect.
Well, we haven't managed to talk about the music side of the whole thing, but maybe in the next podcast where you come back, you will have time. Maybe in a couple of years when you have bigger experience in Germany, we can do another again. And
I would be happy to come back. It was a nice chat with you. I hope that the listeners would enjoy it.
For sure, I'm sure. And I want to remind all the listeners that starting January, there will be a newsletter with the recap. Starting in the end of January, there will be recaps of all the episodes every month, and there will be more news. So you can subscribe the newsletter of the podcast, which is the website thecreativeinsider.com. Of course, links in the description. And to support the podcast, you can always just for free click on follow on all the social media, which also will be linked in the description, which are at Instagram at TCI Podcast and the Creative Insider pages in LinkedIn and Facebook. So thank you, Emad, one more time. Bye and have a good weekend.